Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and I'm sure our audience will enjoy today's sessions. We have some new guests. I think already Dr. Williams, Professor Donalds, about Mr. Alex, everybody knows, and they are contributing a lot in World Talent Economy Forums. Besides that, we have our Professor Joe. He's a very experienced, and definitely we get a lot of information and research related things from Professor Joe, and we have Mr. Cart. First, I want to request Professor Joe, then Mr. Cart, to introduce themselves with our audience. Professor Joe, I think this is the first time you join in World Talent Economy Forum. If you share your experience and your point of view with us, and can you please introduce yourself, please?
Okay, I'm Joe Jordan. I'm on the western edge of the North American continent in Central California, where three of the other people on this forum were the Santa Cruz gang, just south of San Francisco. And I'm a sky guy, I guess you could say. I started a cyber entity called the Sky Power Institute, and the phrase Sky Power I use to refer not only to astronomy and weather, but kind of particularly to renewable energy, energy from the sun, and the wind, and rains, and falling waters falling out of the sky, falling across the landscape, and so on. And, it's clean, limitless, homegrown, democratically distributed energy. Energy is the biggest industry in the world and the most polluting one the way we do it now. But we have a chance to change that in a big way. And it's a huge task. It involves politics and maneuvering, maybe even more so than, science and engineering and technology. But it's all pretty exciting. We're at the threshold of this huge sea change in humanity. But astronomy is one of my very favorite things. And don't let me forget before the end of this forum to tell you all about some really cool stuff happening in the sky here just in the next week or two. And so anytime, I don't know how these forums go, not having been on one before, but I'll just go. I'm prepared to go with the flow while helping create the flow a little bit. So anyway, thanks everybody for paying attention.
Thank you, Mr. Joe. I want to request Mr. Cart. Can you please introduce yourself with our audience?
He's muted.
Oh yeah, unmute the thing.
We can't hear you.
You're muted.
Can you unmute yourself, Mr. Cart?
How about now?
Yes.
There you go.
Cool.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't think my headphone jack was like 3/4 plugged in. That was the problem. I am a science teacher, middle school level, and in 2014, I became injured and had a back surgery and started obsessively reading a website called Clean Technica, and they cover solar, wind, Tesla, all those different things. And I started commenting so much I became a writer for that, and it's been interesting to go from just kind of someone on the periphery of environmental activism to getting more involved in protests, and then starting to writing about renewable energy, which the cost of which is falling so rapidly. Someone like me ended up getting a job writing about it because the contract prices are falling so fast. They just can't keep up with it. The technology is growing so fast. So I'm kind of in a little niche for my activism where I really think we have a shot. Biodiversity loss is going to be tragic. But I think there's a little bit of reason for hope. And I've kind of found this little niche of activism where I'm trying to reach out to people like me who suffered from climate change depression and kind of get them the good news and get them going on something of any size in terms of advocacy. I find a lot of advocates spend just a tremendous amount of time fighting over what's the best thing they can do with their time. And sometimes I think it's important to just find the people that you can work with and start working. And so that's kind of what my environmentalism focuses on. I believe in a diversity of tactics. And, recently Alex and I worked together on a project. I've just been seeking out collaborators, and that's why I'm so glad to be here today. I'm still kind of a greenhorn when it comes to activism. But but it feels really good to get involved beyond just, retweeting something or reposting something on Facebook. And I'm excited to be here and share and learn a lot. So that's probably enough about me.
Thank you. I want to start from Dr. Williams, then Professor Donalds, and our best friend, Mr. Alex, because he's doing a lot of work for World Talent Economy Forums. Thank you for your support. I want to start with Dr. Williams. So how do you want to analyze this point, like global warming? This is true. After the COVID situations, I think that this will be the major challenge, specifically for developing nations. I think for Asia Pacific, this is also challenging for many countries, country like Indonesia, country like India, Bangladesh. They are also Maldives. They're heavily they will be suffer for this climate change and this kind of initiative. Already many changes we are observing. So what do you want to add for today's session, Dr. William?
Well, I guess I'll just begin with stating the obvious. We obviously have to change. You, as all of the guests in your audience know, the problem is widespread and obviously it's global. The solutions are varied, and the need is now. I think a couple of things. I don't know that it's even worthwhile debating whether or not it's an issue anymore, because it is. And most recently this morning, I happened upon the news report that that reported that part of what broke off, the iceberg that broke off recently, is headed to the island of South Georgia. I think that the iceberg is bigger than the island of South Georgia. That, combined with the various islands that we've already lost to the rise of the sea level. I guess the issue is this: is that with regard to developing nations, it's once again a catch-22. They are mineral and or resource rich, but they don't have the refining capabilities that they are seeking right now, and they are trying to emulate what has contributed to the problem so far. And what they should be doing, and it's tougher to say, it's always that thing, do as I say, not as I do, kind of catch-22. But what they ought to be doing is to aggressively be pursuing what we now should stop calling alternative energy sources, but renewable and the future energy sources, wind, solar, water, those kinds of issues. And partly because, and I think that maybe some of the other guests, Alex and maybe Kurt, will get to this point, and even Joe, if I may call you Joe, and that is this:
Yeah.
that with the economies of scale that we are reaching, it makes for smarter investment, particularly for financially strained developing nations, that where each additional dollar actually means a lot more, because it's so scarce for them. What they ought to do is they ought to take that and leverage it in the smartest possible ways, and that's looking towards the future. So with developing countries, I really, once again, because I've been a proponent, I'll say it again, they have the real distinct opportunity to skip over the calcification of what the Western worlds have done in terms of their infrastructure. They can skip over that 100 to 200 year mistake and go directly to where the future is going to go, and invest their dollars there, and then move forward. And on this point, though, I do have to defer to the other panelists, because except with this portion, investing the smart dollars in those areas that we know the future is going to go in. But for the specifics of that, I'll defer to the rest of the panel.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Professor Donald, what do you want to add specifically for these climate change issues? And you have a lot of expertise on that particular points. What will be the impact in the next 10 years?
I expect to see continuing growth in hurricanes. There's more water in the air. We're going to start seeing, basically, I think that I don't just think this, it's predicted that there's a whole area in the south of the United States that's going to start to get to be uninhabitable because ocean rise. And so in developing countries, I'm going to really defer to Joe, who's his Sky Power. He's studied a lot about the energy of available from the sky. But I'm mostly interested in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs and innovation. And as Dr. I forget how to pronounce his name. Said, as he said, there's incredible opportunity. And it's so interesting, like as I mentioned about M-Pesa last time, which is that in Kenya, they developed a system of payments that before the United States, they were paying each other using their phone. And at one time, people in small villages in Africa were buying a phone as an entrepreneur and then selling time to people so that they could call each other. There's just countless things that need to change. Centralized power is going to have to go away, and then we're going to start having distributed power. And as he just said, those all provide incredible opportunities for new businesses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Thank you.
so I will say one other thing, that in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of money that's going into new energy sources. It's one of the bigger things that we invest in here. So the momentum is there. It's happening, and it'll be great.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Alex, you are trying to do a lot of things in the for doing some sort of projects for climate change, and beside that, you are young and you are taking a lot of initiative, and you also visited in different developing nations and Europe for these climate change issues. Can you share your views and what the practical projects we can do for climate change in developing nations? What's your views and what's your idea?
Okay, thank you. Again, these forums I think are so important when it comes to having these conversations. We need to have more of these conversations around the world, more forums like this, not just educating people and voting with our money, but changing our whole infrastructure. So we have a lot of work to do in a short amount of time, and we all can be a part of that in different ways. So there has to be a balance in the future. In the past, we were more focused on sustainability, trying to reduce our carbon footprint and help minimize ecological damage. Now we're in a situation where we don't just have to focus on divesting from the fossil fuels and doing all these eco things. We now have to also be more focused, or equally focused, on emergency preparedness, because we are going to continue to see more disasters around the world. These are the disasters that scientists like Joe Jordan predicted decades ago. Around the year 2001, 2002, I started learning about climate change and environmental issues. It wasn't until I went to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, when I was 25 years old, by myself, helping people, distributing food, and I saw the incredible impact of superstorms. I started studying superstorms, hurricanes, forest fires, and other consequential reactions to climate change. I actually took Joe Jordan's class in 2008. I thought it should have been incorporated in all university and college curriculum. Unfortunately, because of budget cuts, I think there was a year or two where Joe actually had his renewable energy and resource course at Cabrillo College defunded, or it was canceled for a year or two, and it just didn't make sense. It's like one of the most important things for humanity and the survival of our future, and it was underfunded. So maybe Joe can correct me if I'm wrong on any of that. It may have been 2010, 2011. So I took that class in 2008, and later I ended up becoming a huge activist and learning as much as I could about sustainability, climate change, ecological collapse, and I continued to educate other people. So Joe helped me a huge boost in the direction that I wanted to go. So we need more education, and thankfully we had that entire discussion on education a few days ago, because it is so important. So I just want to mention again, there has to be a balance, not just sustainability, lowering our carbon footprint, we do have to start planning for disasters of the future so we can be more resilient, so our economies can be more resilient. In the past, we used to see a disaster, a hurricane, some forest fires affect a region, and we'd have help from outside sources address those disasters, help the people get food and aid into the areas that need it most. As we continue to see increases in parts per million or greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, we're going to continue to see Earth's atmosphere temperatures increase. We're continuing to see ecological collapse and biodiversity crisis around the world. So we are going to continue to see more disasters. Hurricanes and forest fires are not just going to increase in size, they're going to increase in velocity and speed. They're going to start happening simultaneously in more places around the world. So we also need more people directing their attention towards taking emergency courses, the EMT course, the CERT course, the Red Cross courses, and just doing everything they can. We got to refocus our time and our energy. So that's important. And again, the reason why we're doing this is it not just about us anymore. It's not just about the future generations of the world anymore. It's not just trying to leave a better world for the future generations. It's now about our own survival, because we're seeing all of this happening right before our eyes around the world. So for developing countries, it's really important because they have limited budgets and they're not as resilient when a major hurricane or cyclone comes through those regions, major forest fires, oil spills. They're not as resilient because they don't have as much capital to respond. And unfortunately, America's not helping as many countries as we have in the past under other administrations, because the United States having the money that they have, the GDP, and being one of the world's superpowers. I love that we supported the United Nations, the major organizations, and we were able to help countries through difficult times. So yeah, again, we have a lot of work to do in a short amount of time, and I do hope Joe also talks about some solutions from a scientific perspective. So yeah, thanks again for having me on the show.
Thank you. Professor Joe, I think that already our audience want to know more about the climate change and what the scientific advice you want to give to us, and what will happen actually in the futures. What will be your prediction for the next 10 years or something?
Well, let's see, 10 years, when you're talking climate, 10 years is sort of in the realm of what we call blips, a little blip in time. What really matters on climate is more like, at least 50 years or 100 or 1,000. But on the other hand, because there is so much more energy in the atmosphere now than is normal, the sun keeps pouring the same energy at the same rate, more or less. But the key here is that our atmosphere, due to the new constituents that we keep adding to it, excess carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, that is trapping a bunch of the energy. And so you get kind of echoed, recycled infrared energy on top of the continually inpouring visible and infrared energy from the sun. And so because you have more energy in the atmosphere, cutting to the chase, things are speeding up a lot in the way they are happening. And so, the term climate change, I think, is kind of a yawner. We should be calling it climate holocaust or climate chaos, just get right down to cases here to let people know what we mean. So yeah, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I'm talking on a scale of hundreds of years. But okay, that's the gloom and doom that we all keep hearing. And one of the reasons why nothing much is happening about it is because we're not getting to what I call the good parts, the solutions, possible solutions. And there are a whole realm of those. And of course, you need money and politics. Well, heck, what is politics? It's basically dickering over money. And so how are we going to spend our national and world treasures? There was a talk I gave. I sent this, I don't know who saw it, maybe just Sharif via private chat, or maybe all the listeners or viewers can see it. I did a TED talk back in the year 20.
I was there, Joe. I was
All
sitting in
right.
the audience. We'll let you know.
All right. Yeah, well, hey, now everybody can see it, and it keeps getting better with time. I've been finding it was on energy and the future of the world, and the way you can get it is just to go to Joe Jordan TED Talk. You just go to DuckDuckGo or Google or whatever your favorite web search engine is, and you type 4 words, Joe Jordan TED Talk. Now you might get another TED Talk I did. I did one in 2014, which is good. But it's not nearly as good, I don't think, as the first one. And so the key phrase for the first one is the solar window of opportunity. It was called the solar window of opportunity. For one thing, I didn't have a beard back then. the new one in 2014, yeah, I have a beard. By the way, I see Kavita, Donald's wife, in the background. Hi, Kavita. I don't know if she but
Joe just said hi to you.
Hey, Kavita. Oh, well, maybe she's listening to the
He
music.
can't hear me. I've got this on.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so yeah, watch both TED Talks. What the heck? Tell me which one you think is better. I had a young beard on the second one, but the one without the beard and the one where everything just kind of went like almost perfectly was in 2011, the solar window of opportunity. And it starts with a question: are we going to make it as a species on the Earth for much longer? Which is a real cliffhanger because we really are kind of approaching a perfect storm here. Anyway, go ahead and watch that and then let me know. And I did dig up a link for that particular TED Talk, the earlier, better one. And I will put that when I get a chance here into the chat, and maybe Sharif can forward it to everybody else, or maybe no, not that one, not that one. You see that picture? That one has the beard. That's a good TED Talk. That's worth watching. But the much, much better one is my first one from 3 years earlier, 2011. So again, the key phrase for the one I want you to see first and foremost is the solar window of opportunity. The one you're looking at right there with that picture of me there with the beard is that one's called The Sky's the Limit. Solutions something or other. And that's a good one. But go to the other one, the solar window of opportunity. I have a link for it. I'll just drop the actual link into the chat. So I don't know who did. Alex come up with that, or who put that one up there?
Sharif.
Sharif. Okay, yeah. Go to the other one.
Yes,
Well, I'll drop the other one in here. Let's see here. I'm doing it right now. There's that link. So go to that link I just put into the chat. But I mean, don't do it now. It's I don't know, 12 minutes long. Well worth watching. It's funny. It has lots of pictures of the sky with cool astronomy stuff, but it's all focused at making the point that look, there's basically one way out of this mess that we are more and more deeply in, and it is turning to the sun in a big way for our energy, which again is the largest industry by far in the world and dominates everything. So there you go.
Okay.
Oh, share screen option.
Yes. Dr. William, beside that, like, as you are policy expert, as well as that politician has a lot of responsibility to play the roles right now, even for this COVID-19 situation, as well as for this global warming issues. Yes, as per my knowledge from the developing nations, they are trying to figure out the way, but fact is that they do not get enough collaborations and cooperations and support from developed nations, those who are mainly cause for this global warming and this kind of issues. So how do you want to share your experience, like as a policymakers, as a politician, what should be the roles of the politicians for the developing nation, as well as how they can collaborate with the developed nations politicians for solve these things?
Okay, well, first and foremost, what I can say is, and I'm actually pleased to say this, and that is to say that help is on the way. With the recent change in the, soon to change administration in the United States, you've already seen a dramatic shift in what the United States' position is going to be with regard to climate change and the need to move things. I'm heartened. Well, there are two developments that the audience of the world should take heed of, and the most important of which is, first, that President-elect Biden has appointed John Kerry, former senator, former Secretary of State, former Democratic presidential nominee, John Kerry, as the special envoy on climate. Now, climate change has been dear to his heart, and he's been an advocate, a staunch advocate for climate change. He was one of the authors of the Paris Climate Accords. What I was actually pleased with hearing most recently was that, and many of you may have already seen it, he participated in an interview where he was climate change and the Paris Accords were brought up. And this time, 4 years later, he's taking the position that the United States' participation in it hasn't gone far enough, in the sense that the goals and measurements of the Paris Accords simply aren't sufficient anymore. And that his notion is that we be looking that we're forward thinking moving forward. And so for at least the next 4 years, to the extent that we can, we have somebody that has deep experience and is going to be representing the United States in terms of a global consortium. Now, my hope is that developing nations will, at least at this point, at least have a beacon or a place to go and say, okay, we now have a starting point, and we have somebody that brings essentially street credibility to the notion. And from there, as Joe Jordan, politics is about dickering over money. And a lot of times the politicians, when they get into these discussions, they are trying to figure out how they're going to get what kind of impact that's going to have, more specifically, and to be blunt about it, with whether or not they're going to get reelected. Now, what I'm heartened by here in the United States is that the sea change, the over 80 million that have voted for President-elect Biden, represents just along with the upcoming generations and the work that Alex and Kurt are performing, is simply this, that we have seen a fundamental shift, and that politicians are going to see and begin to realize at a very fundamental way that in order for them to remain in power and get the votes that they need, that they have to make a serious commitment, that corporations, to the extent that they are subjected to social activism and economic activism, that they are going to change their views, and that we will begin to continue the process of making it a high point. What that will mean is that there, practically speaking, there'll be less fights about whether or not we're doing enough for climate change, but rather the fights will become how we're doing it. So the discussions are going to turn into the policy. Which one's better? Solar farms, the sun or the ocean, or other types of renewable energies, or is it also investing in conservation? And the flip side, so that is stop wasting, then conserving, and then looking and using alternative resources. But I'm heartened by it. And so with regard to developing nations, America's back. And I'm fully confident, I'm pleased that I can be able to say that. And I know that John Kerry is a leading force and a respected figure around the world. And to the extent that other nations have been scared about what has been at best an uneven policy and or conflicting messages from the United States, that's all about to change, and we've already begun to see it. But I, again, will defer to the panelists, because they certainly would know more than me. I can tell you on a policy side, things are going to change, and America is going to begin to bring more of its efforts and leadership to bear, and that I'm hopeful for.
Yes. But I think like upcoming presidents, Mr. Biden administration, they are also recognize these green technologies and the global warming issues. This is also very important. Even now, everybody, specifically the COVID situation, they can understand that global warming is a big issue. So I know few of the countries, those who have strong dependency on HFO, coal-based power plant, now they are thinking seriously about this green technology, solar technologies, and this kind of things, and it's happening right now. It's yes.
And actually, Dr. Sharif, on that point, what's going to be really interesting, and I think one of the undercurrents that we will begin to see, or at least I'm hopeful, and to the extent that I can push it along here just by voicing it, is simply this: that if we as a world can start with an unknown disease, and then within the course of 18 months, more or less, start from scratch, which is zero, and get a handle on that problem, even though sometimes the efforts were non-coordinated. but we can get a handle on that in 18 months. Imagine what the world can do knowing that we have a problem with climate change, and then be able to say such that when the naysayers come along and say, well, we can't get anything accomplished, we could say, listen, we just took care of an unknown pandemic virus that had the potential to wipe out significant portions of the of the world population. If we can do that in 18 months, what's stopping us now from really putting in, if we're serious about it, a concerted effort? Because you can no longer say, oh, it can't be done. You can no longer take the position, reasonably speaking, at least I would assert, and say that, oh, we have to wait 20, 25, 30 years and we'll put in a plan in place, and maybe by 2055. I heard the other day, and not to date myself, but I will because I'm not worried. And the simple thing is this, is that somebody suggested that, hey, listen, the world would be okay, say by 2066. And by 2066, I'm going to be 98 years old. I'm like, I'm not waiting until 2066. I don't know about you guys, but if we can come up with a vaccine for a virus that we didn't know about that was going to kill the entire world, we can do that in 18 months. Why can't I fix the world, at least get a head start in 18 months? Why should I have to wait another 40 years? I'm not going to wait till I'm 98 years old. I'm certainly not going to leave this problem for my kids. And so it seems to me that, and we get it sometimes, that people out there that are on the front lines and the naysayers say, oh, they're just activists and they're angry and and they just use all kinds of ad hominem attacks and just call them all the bad names in the world. But I think it's actually legitimate to be angry. I'm not going to wait until I'm 98 years old and then say, oh, okay, well, maybe we made incremental progress. I was like, we just cured a pandemic. Literally, tell me how we can cure a pandemic, but we can't fix what we already know to be true when we have solutions that are out there. And I think it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was your guest the other day, Ben Bernanke out of Switzerland now, but from the Netherlands, who said that what it would take to fully fund the 17 sustainable goals of the United Nations is just 1% of the global domestic product. That's 1%. Of the global GDP. Trust me. I'd be like, let me sign up for 1%. If that means cleaner air, if it means cleaner water, if it means new jobs, if it means all the other stuff that we're talking about. Yeah, there are going to be glitches along the way, but that's part of the process. If it means taking care of poverty in developing nations, if it means all the other scourges that we have, 1% of the GDP, I'm all for it. But we can no longer sit there, anybody, I don't think at this point in time, and legitimately raise the argument and say, well, we don't have enough money. Oh, I'm not so sure about the time. I'll give you a plan by 2020, by 2035, maybe 2066. It's like, are you kidding me? Sorry.
Yes. Thank you. I think we have activists like Mr. Alex, Mr. Cart, as well as Professor Donalds. How do you want to add? Specifically, Dr. William, he come up with a very interesting strategy, and according to his strategy, it's possible that we can solve these things, and we should work together on that particular point. Yes, I want to start with Mr. Cart, then Professor Donalds and Alex.
Yeah, to start, I saw two quick questions up there. One asked about, do scientists agree on climate change? And we certainly do. And the ones who don't are generally paid by the fossil fuel lobby to not. So if you are hearing there's all kinds of misinformation out there, that is part of my job on a full-time basis. The misinformation is very clever. They don't get reality, but they get lying very, very well. And then the other question was, is it too late to stop climate change? You can't say with certainty how bad it's going to get, but the tools that we have are better than they've ever been. When I started watching solar, it was, sorry, I'll use some numbers. Hopefully they make sense. It was over 40 cents per kilowatt hour. That's the unit of measure that, we pay our bills with, kilowatt hour. And then in 2014, there was this big, huge milestone that was reached. Saudi Arabia hit 6 cents per kilowatt hour, just under 6 cents per kilowatt hour. And then just last year, I wrote a piece that was shared by Bill McKibben for Clean Technica, and the United States had it down below 3 cents per kilowatt hour. And then just more recently, the project hasn't been built yet. It's going to be built in 2 years. Portugal got down to 1.35 cents per kilowatt hour for solar. And so that's just amazing. The price of solar since the 1970s has fallen by over 400 times. And we've seen batteries decrease at a rate of 16% per year. And Tesla has just come out with their new battery day. And you know what? It had a very clear message. We're going to get it done. We're going to science, the crap out of this. Like that one great Matt Damon line, and I just love Dr. Williams' energy, as I said earlier, biodiversity loss is going to be tragic. The storms are going to be tragic, but I think the scientists have not given up this whole time, and so we just keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting, and the problem is huge and daunting, but we just don't stop. We just don't stop because we don't know. We don't want to talk about it too much to the wider public. We don't want to deal with talking about negative emissions and potentially start to take carbon out of the air because that's a complete unknown and there are so many side effects. But if we have to do that, even now, Jim Hansen, and hopefully I've got his full name right, even now he's starting to just barely kind of talk about, you know what, we're gonna bring this down, and if we've got to use negative emissions, like we're gonna have to cross that path when it comes. So I do think the solutions. If you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have said civilization would collapse. Today, no, we have a chance. We definitely have a chance. And to me, the question is how much biodiversity, how many species do we save, how many lives do we save? So every little action adds up, and you can never be afraid to start too small. One of the other things that's going to drop tremendously in price is the price of meat substitutes and fake meat. By 2030, we could see a combination of fake meat and lab-grown meat that's 1/5 the price of real meat. And then we can just take, it would be longer out, but eventually, long-term, we could take half of the farms that we have and just put that back to natural ecosystems. If we can get this fake meat to taste like real meat, and that's coming. If we follow the cost curves, it's coming. One of the things I do have a problem with the environmental community is we want everything to happen on a linear term. We want to see this much emission cuts per year at this same straight linear rate. But that's not how it's going to be. This technology is going to be a curve. It's going to be more of an S curve. Sorry, I should have a graph or something. Maybe next time I can come with some graphs. But I think we do have a real shot at least I'm not as much worried about runaway climate change. Could it happen? Without a doubt. But what I'm saying is, and I don't want to in any way preach any amount of complacency. I just want to preach that we have a chance. And, as so long as we have a chance, we keep fighting. And I got Dr. Williams got me all excited, and now I'm going to calm down because I just really appreciate your energy, sir.
No problem.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think Alex.
Yes, Alex. Yes.
Unmute my mic. So thank you, Kurt. I do want to mention, so Kurt is optimistic about the future and our solutions, and that we do have a chance. So I often tell people it doesn't matter if we think there's a chance, if we know there's a chance, or if we know there's going to be catastrophic climate change and our whole civilization is going to collapse. My view or opinion on that is it doesn't matter what's going to happen. We have too much to lose to give up. It's because if we give up, we're giving up for the smaller children of the world, the children alive today and the children that are going to be born in the following years. So it's just not morally right for any of us to give up. It seems like we, like a fight or a movie, we just have to die trying because, again, we have too much to lose. The suffering that's going to be caused because of man's impact on the environment, the consequential reactions of using the fossil fuels to expand our economy and everything are going to be devastating. So, yeah, I just continue to tell people we have too much to lose. And it's not just about the children and all of that, if we give up, it's also all the animals, all the sentient beings that are suffering around the world and suffering because of ecosystem collapse and what we're doing to the environment. I do want to say I appreciate Dr. William as an energy in the morning this early, because it's early for me. So it's nice to wake all of us up and all of that. So I was also going to answer that question: do scientists agree about climate change? And Joe might be able to correct us. I think it was like 97% scientists with all of the reviews and the I watched a whole like documentary on it. I can't explain it now, but I think it's up to like 99% now, or it increased. So there is more scientific consensus around the world regarding that. So I did want to say for Dr. William, that was a really great example with the pandemic, how we solved the pandemic in such a short amount of time. And I wanted to mention to Joe. So Joe said, okay, we're not just going to call it climate change because it just like doesn't sound as serious as it is. So some people call it a climate catastrophe, and I've been calling it a climate emergency. So to help raise awareness, and I try my best all the time, I actually got climate emergency tattooed on my arm. So every time I'm somewhere, you know, paying for something, talking on my phone, my hand in my pocket, it helps raise awareness. So then if someone, you know, might have some doubts about climate change, they might see it and be like, well, that guy believes in it pretty seriously, so maybe he knows something I don't. Because the misinformation that slowed down our potential progress around the world is ridiculous, and that's what got us into this crisis. Kurt mentioned Battery Day, I believe. Is that what it's called? Battery Day? So Elon Musk spoke at Battery Day. It's an annual event. I think it may have been going on for a year or two. I think definitely 2 years, right? Battery Day?
No, it was the first year, but they do lots of events like that are very common, easily to get confused.
Yeah. So Elon Musk spoke at Battery Day, and one of the first things, like in his first sentence or two, was like, we're in a climate emergency, and climate change is one of the most important things humanity is going to have to address. So it's really nice that he's reaching such a large audience with this information, and he's working towards so many solutions. As far as activism, there's just so many things we could do. I try not to repeat myself because I've now been on several of these shows, these broadcasts. So there's a lot of ways that we could all change, and it's not just voting with our money. As far as activism goes, so I was a little extreme. I got the tattoo, but you could also have anything environmental related on your hat. You could have it on your t-shirt. You can do videos like this to reach other people. I've now given public speeches at middle school, high school, and college classes 27 times. So that's reaching a larger audience. If you have a chance to get on a radio show, that reaches a lot of people. Anytime that my video or pictures makes it on the news, that reaches people through that method. Having conversations with people one-on-one throughout the, in public city streets is one way to reach people on social media. There's also posting on social media. That's one of the methods. So there's blogs, there's YouTube videos, there's other related internet activities. Let's see. There's picketing and going out and doing a protest. I mean, actually holding a sign and having a megaphone. There's writing a book is another way to reach a lot of people. You write a book. Creating a website is a way to reach a lot of people. I've made a lot of stickers in the past that I handed out to everyone. I actually have this thing right here. Oh. So every time I have money, before I spend my money, I have this huge stamp and it says climate emergency, and I stamp it. And it's like borderline illegal, but climate change is a lot worse. So I take this stamp and I stamp it on all the money. So then when that money goes into circulation, it reaches more people. So I constantly continue, like, how could I reach people? How can I get this message out? Because there's so many other activists around the world talking about, equality and equal rights and animal agriculture. And they're all important, because to address climate change, we have a lot of things around our society that we have to change. So it is important, but climate change is the most important, because if we can't solve climate change, all of these other things aren't going to matter. We're all just going to suffer and die. So climate change is really important. Becoming an activist, there's a lot of information online. I like using WikiHow to try to provide information to people. I can search WikiHow to start a community garden. in Google, and then it comes up, wiki how to recycle, how to ride the bus if people don't know how to ride the bus. So WikiHow has a really good page that's like, you just Google search wiki how to become an activist, and it just talks about like knowing your information, doing your research, how to reach people. So because we do not only just need people in emergency services and more environmental scientists, we need more activists and more educators to educate more people, because again, we're all in this together, everyone on earth, and we all have to work together, and education is such an important part of that. So those are some tips and suggestions that I have to contribute to this conversation.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Professor Donalds, you are from Silicon Valleys and you have a lot of experience. Like I want to go for solutions, like example, what the solution right now we have in hands for this climate change.
Well, I think the others have said this, that especially Joe, that the price of power from solar is going down quickly. The city of Palo Alto has their own power company, and they just hooked up to a solar grid, and the solar power in Palo Alto is 3.4 cents a kilowatt, which is much lower than oil or fossil fuels. I'm interested also in what Dr. William was talking about. It's fabulous that we've got a new administration that is conscious of the issues and not trying to hide it. All of the countries in the world are going to have to figure out ways to work together. I know China is investing a lot in alternative, I should say sky power. It's better in that they're still building coal plants, but at a much slower rate. So coal is out. In fact, this week's Economist was, I forget, but the end of coal or something, discussing how it's just going to go away because it's just far too expensive to maintain. What I'm most concerned about is things like the Syrian civil war, which is a war that was basically started because of a huge drought that they had in Syria. Lots of people from the countryside moved into the cities, and the dislocation and basically financial problems that these people had just basically caught fire. And I'm really worried. I'm worried that we're going to see a lot of that everywhere in the world. I think Greta Thunberg talks about this a lot. That part of the climate emergency is the necessity for people to relocate. And when they relocate, they're going to relocate to some place where people already are, and that is a situation that frequently doesn't work out very well. So I'm optimistic. I don't think human beings are going to die because of the climate emergency, but when we're going to have things like, how is New York City going to continue to be what it is? The rate of that the oceans are rising is accelerating. And as Dr. William pointed out, giant icebergs are breaking out and going to, bump into islands that the iceberg is bigger than the island. So that's I wish I knew what to do about that. And I like Alex's grassroots view of it. I think that we need to encourage all of our representatives and all of the people in the United States to get back into the Paris Accords. And I don't know quite how we're going to be able to do it, but we have to coordinate this between different countries, because Bangladesh, it's just going to get worse and worse. And how many people are probably in those floodplains that are going to have to move? 100 million, something like that. Is that right, Sharif?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that Alex's idea of changing everyone's consciousness, he does it at a grassroots level, which is really fascinating. But right now in the United States, we have this group of people, a lot of people, like, what is it, 70 million or something like that, who have what's called cognitive dissonance. And what that is when you believe in something so much that any evidence to the contrary, you justify it in some sort of a way, and you say, well, that really isn't evidence to the contrary. So I'm wondering about how we're going to be able to get the message. And environmental organizations have been working on this because, as Kirk said, the ability to lie and sell lies is so incredible that there's Jonathan Swift had a great quote where he said that a lie is traveled around the world so fast that he said it beautifully, but he said the one part about it is, he says, once you hear it, it's done its job, and it's very, very difficult to undo people's beliefs. And so I think that's an incredible challenge, and that's something I'm working on in social sciences, is trying to figure out how the relationships of people create the reality, and how we can start changing these realities. And it seems to me that right now it's just older people are just not changing. It's a quote that's attributed to Niels Bohr is, science progresses funeral by funeral, because people just don't change. They die off and new people come. But if you look at Pew Research, which does a really good job of looking at the demographics of people that believe in, know about climate change, or are willing to accept the reality of climate change, the younger you are, the more likely you are. And in most countries in the world, people are far, far, far more aware of it than the United States. So we just have to keep working on figuring out how to message these things in the right kind of emotional way, that it goes beyond science. It's people's emotions. And it's an interesting job, and people are working on it. So if you look around for that, you'll find stuff. And okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. William. Yes.
Yeah, if I could, and Donald, you raised a very important point, and I think it goes unnoticed. I mean, two things are true. One is that the rarest resource right now, believe it or not, on the planet is high quality sand, because it's used in glass and things of that nature. And so that's one thing. The second on the list is water. And water, obviously, in the fight over water is, it has begun a number of wars, fights, you name it. And on that point, the question is that, we've got the oceans, and one thing that we ought to be looking at more seriously are desalination plants. And I know that in Saudi Arabia and in the Arab world, they've been investing heavily into desalination plants. I know to a limited degree, at least out on the West Coast, I'm not sure if I think it's San Diego that has invested in, don't quote me necessarily on that.
I think it's Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara, okay. A desalination plant as the future, and essentially what it does is it's an operation whereby they take seawater and they take the salt out of the seawater and turn it into potable water or drinkable water. And to the extent that we see in various countries and regions around the world, this notion of a dearth of water that leads to these other two catastrophes, mass migration, wars, refugees, and then all sorts of health problems, we should be looking at desalination types of plants in order to work on the water issue. So I mean, that's just another concrete area. What I'm interested in hearing from Joe about is that with the advent of solar, solar can be used to power so many different things in so many different ways. And I mean, how do you see that being applied, say, in solutions across the board? I mean, it's not just with car batteries or things of that nature. I mean, how do you see it working out realistically? Because I honestly don't have a clue, Joe. It's way above my pay grade.
Well, the basic thing, by the way, I've been really appreciating everything all of you are saying, and especially the ones I don't already know, like Kurt and William and Sharif. Later, I guess I'd like to get info on you folks, where you even are. I don't know. Is Kurt around Santa Cruz?
San Antonio.
Okay, cool. I went there a long time ago, before you were born, in 1968. They had a World Fair kind of thing down there called the Hemisphere, like the Western Hemisphere. And anyway, but so basically, anything you need energy for, you can do with solar energy. And, a lot of people have this myth that, solar's too diffuse and too weak and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you can focus it, you can concentrate it, and you can melt lead with it, but it's just a matter of getting the infrastructure together and investing in that like we mean it. Let me bring in a big new idea here, which is only partly my idea. It's mainly been developed by a friend of mine who used to teach solar energy at Cabrillo College, where I was Alex's teacher years later on the same topic, solar and renewable energy and energy efficiency and all these things. This guy's name is Bob Staten. His author name on the book, it's Robert Staten, like stay, like you tell a dog, good dog, stay, Stayton, like 2,000 pounds. Robert Staten, and the book is called The Solar Dividend. And here's the idea. We can solve not only environmental problems, but also economic problems and poverty. And I point that out in my TED Talk that I'm trying to get folks to watch, that these are the two great problems. Well, war and poverty are the two really huge problems that the human race needs to grow up and deal with. But poverty, how are we going to solve that using solar? Well, here you go. Now try this on for size. We have this huge gift of enormous amounts of solar just pouring into the planet all the time. Well, we build up the harvest. We harvest it. We build up the infrastructure to harvest that. Now, of course, it takes money to make money. You have to invest to be able to then reap the benefits of that investment. But we work as a society at the state level, the national level, ultimately the world level, to pay everybody what used to be called a GMI, guaranteed minimum income, way back in the days of George McGovern, who I had the pleasure to meet once when he spoke here in Santa Cruz. Wonderful guy. But now it's called a UBI, Universal Basic Income. And, people think Andrew Yang invented that idea, but it long predates him. I mean, it's a great idea. And by the way, the way that the European countries, like Norway and Iceland, have dealt with this pandemic and have crushed it has been that they pay their people. And even if they can't work or are not working, they just pay them. It's basically a universal basic income. And by doing that, where people do not have to worry, we don't have to have this stupid mad scramble to open up businesses because otherwise we're not going to survive economically. If people are covered economically, well, then a whole lot of problems are solved very neatly. And well, how do you do that? This vast income we all have from solar. We build the infrastructure and everybody is born with basically 10 kilowatts worth of solar energy to their name. I mean, you can't actually go out and point to those are my panels, but we invest to the point that there's enough solar that everybody can get like several $1,000s a year, say maybe $10,000 or $12,000 a year. I mean, the details are going to be worked out. But anyway, this book, Solar Dividend, paints this basic picture and actually analyzes it in some detail. And, there are all kinds of arguments and skepticism. And of course, the skepticism I always get on any good idea is people say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, the answer to how you're going to pay for it is with money. Just the same way we pay for, bankrolling military largesse on an obscene scale and bailing out banksters to the tune of trillions of dollars. That all took money. So, I mean, let's use money for the right things for a change. And this is a really exciting, major pathway. I highly recommend that we all check out Bob Staten's fairly new book called The Solar Dividend. And in fact, he recently was interviewed, and there's a YouTube of it or something that I could send you the link to it. I don't have it handy, but hopefully we'll all be in touch and can share all this type of info later on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I have more things. Like example, when we uh, try to develop a different kind of solution, let's say the example in Malaysia, they are producing solar panel and many interesting things for handle this global warming issues. But most important thing is that uh, developing a local ecosystem with their new innovations, with their new technology, with their human resources and different kind of things. What the specific guidelines you have for developing nations, how they can develop their ecosystems? Like example, for handling these things, this global warming issue, definitely they need better ecosystem to manage these points. What your observations? I want to start with Professor Donald, then Mr. Cart, and Alex. Yeah.
Well, there's an interesting fact about the power system in the United States. When electric power was first developed, the idea was that there was going to be local generation, but it competed with the gas companies who had this huge distribution network so that they could centralize basically. Well, it was more necessary. So the gas companies were the power companies at the time, and they got the electric resources, and then they used these systems of centralized distribution where you have massive power plants and the infrastructure to deliver the power. But that's not necessary. With solar, that's not necessary at all, because all generation becomes local. And so since many of these countries are starting from scratch in some cases, I mean, there's a lot of rural places in India, say for instance, that doesn't have power. There's no power there. In Africa, and so even China, and so the whole idea of one of the main things about solar is that it is local distribution, or it can be local distribution. So I think when you're talking about the infrastructure, that's the key. It's the same way that cell phones in those countries leapfrogged the United States, because we were dependent on this whole infrastructure of copper wire, and the phone companies really didn't want you to have cell phones because it was much more valuable to them to be able to control centrally the phone calls. And they evolved into ways that they could still do that. But I think that's the most important thing for a country like Malaysia, is listen to the research and develop centralized power, distributed power.
Mhm. Yes. Mr. Cart, how do you want to add to, like, how we can develop better ecosystem for handle these global warming issues?
Yeah, I did have a chance to go to Kuala Lumpur a couple years ago, and it was just eye-popping the amount of skyscrapers that were being built. So I don't know too much. I know there's a tremendous amount of solar manufacturing going on in Malaysia, and the world's really going to be counting on Malaysia to continue to produce high-quality, low-cost solar cells. I spend a lot more time actually in Thailand, and what I kind of see there is I see this chasing after the American standard. So hopefully, as an American, I can say the American living standard with big. We got to get over that. We got to defeat that. I love that when I go to Indochina, that the size of the apartments and the studio apartments. It's amazing to see how well things are designed for smaller living, because in America we're kind of going through this what we call a McMansion phase. So I would just really hope the third world doesn't start to trend to more and more of that, bigger is better, because it's not. I'm actually sitting here right next to a river. I've moved into a tiny home now, and I'm laying down in the back of it. So maybe at the end of the show, I can push down my back wall and it goes right out over an island. So I think one of the big things is just, the renewable energy. We want to push for policy. We don't want to stop giving up on politics, but I feel like a lot of that is just going to come. A lot of that is just going to come in due course because of the cost. And I'm not in any way saying we don't need to push on policy, But 10 years ago, I thought we would have to completely get rid of capitalism by 2025. I would like to see capitalism drastically reformed, but I think the cost declines of solar and wind have bought us some time, such that we don't have to have a complete revolution, so fast. And I'm seeing a lot in the third world that's really, they are really leapfrogging that. Dr. William talked about that.
Mhm.
They have this opportunity. I just wrote an article like 5 gigawatts of wind and solar, which is about equivalent to 40 nuclear power plants. That's how big that is, and that's just one state. And the price is just collapsing. So anything that we
Hey,
can
Kurt,
do.
could you say that again? You cut out. It's 50 gigawatts, 51 gigawatts, correct?
41.5. Sorry.
41.5. Okay. I knew because
Yeah.
we had a prior conversation, but I don't know if the viewers heard you. So that's huge.
Yes.
Go ahead.
That's huge.
Continue.
We're going from this transition where India, and I use India because it's one of the biggest and most important third world countries. It's not really. Some parts of it aren't third world anymore. Developing countries. Sorry, I like that term better. So they have this paradigm shift to where now they might start to outlead us. As where before they were saying, well, we're not going to do anything until you do something. And now, thank God that the people are understanding how much it's going to affect them and understanding how simple the solutions have become. They're starting to just get excited and say, you know what, let's just keep one-upping each other, all these countries. And so just get involved. And I'm kind of losing my train of thought, but I hope I answered some of your all's questions.
Mhm. Yes. Mr. Alex, yes. Even
Yes,
there is a
thank
new
you.
new questions from the audience that what's the main difference between climate change and global warming. I think they want to understand more about this point. Yeah.
Okay.
Even one
Wonderful.
point I just want to add for today's audience as well as today's guest. Tomorrow we have session for green technology, specifically for green energy, and day after tomorrow we have session for water treatments and this point. So if you want to join, definitely I want to welcome you, because this is very, very valuable for the developing nations, like climate change, as well as this green energy and the water related things. So Mr. Alex, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So a few moments ago, we did talk about Syria and the drought, and Joe might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. So that whole region obviously is an arid, hot region, and we're going to continue to see more heat-related, more heat waves, more droughts, and more water shortages in that region. There's really great documentaries that I'd recommend watching on Amazon or Netflix, or somehow accessing on the worldwide internet. There's documentaries on the world water wars and water shortages in the future. I did take a course at Cabrillo College, I think around 2009. It was called Anthropology, Surviving the Future. We learned a lot about different things that would happen in Earth's biosphere and things that we would have to prepare for. We broke into separate groups, and my group focused on water shortages, how to filter water. So we did learn a lot about where there is water, how you access water, about desalination and all of that. So there are going to be more water shortages in the future on a wide scale spectrum. 2 days ago, an article just came out. How I didn't read the article, I apologize, but this is scary. This is what people are worried about. So the article was in Business Insider, and I only read the title and the headline, but it's about how water is now going to be traded on the stock market or something. It's going to have a stock, so you can like buy and trade water rights on like the open stock market, just like gold and silver. I don't know. It just sounds scary. And I hope we don't go that direction with air and other, resources we should all have. So as I believe someone mentioned the increase in rise in ocean levels. So not only is that just an issue with Bangladesh, parts of Florida, New York, it's also concerning because every millimeter, every inch, you know, metric or standard, every the rise has a slow impact on communities. In New Orleans, for instance, they're losing a football field or two like every second or every 60 seconds. It's crazy. But it's more concerning, not just the ocean level rising, but whenever there's cyclonic activity, whenever there's a hurricane, because you not only have the forward trajectory of the hurricane moving forward, you have the there's like, it's kind of hard to explain through this video, but there's a low pressure system under hurricanes, and it causes a bulge where the ocean levels actually rise higher, and it rises. So when that continues to approach an island, community, or continent, it brings all that water with it. So an extra 2 inches of water when connected to a hurricane is really devastating. And if you connect that to maybe where there's some sort of inlet and it goes, so, okay, there's other aspects when it comes to hurricanes, but also if it's high tide or storm tide with rise in ocean sea levels and hurricanes, that's why we're seeing so much devastation in association with hurricanes. So I don't want to get into all the hurricane stuff. Joe did mention universal income. I wrote about it in my book that I released 4 years ago. I think it's really important. We need to start doing more universal income around the world because technology is going to continue to replace people, manufacturing, automation, artificial intelligence, AI. We're going to continue to see less jobs in a lot of sectors and then more jobs in new sectors. But I do think that universal income is going to be important and continuing to tax the rich more than we do now. I recently read, you can double check, I don't want to spread misinformation, so feel free to check this, but I did read somewhere that 32 out of 33 of the developed nations around the world provide some sort of universal income, excluding the United States. Again, last 3 years ago, I went through 11 European countries. Some of them are providing universal income or something similar. Sorry to jump around, but we were talking about solar. I did actually take Bob Staten's course in solar technology at Cabrillo College. I read through his book. It was part of our school curriculum. And I do remember government incentives being an important part in encouraging more people to purchase solar and making it easier and more affordable for the average homeowner. So I do think that that's another important part, because when you have solar and you have people and homeowners, when you have government support and incentives and loans, I think it also helps us transition towards renewable energies. So to go back to the first initial question, there's so many countries around the world, and I don't like saying this, but it's like not one shoe fits all. There's a lot of, so it's hard to be broad with how countries are going to adapt to the impending climate crisis, how they're going to adapt to transitioning to renewable energies, because countries have different resources, they have different volumes of capital, they have different education systems. So if we narrowed it down to maybe one country, we might be able to focus, or one region, but that question's a little bit complex, I think, to for me to answer on a broad scale. And Joe might be able to answer the question regarding global warming and climate change. So there is a major difference. First, I want to start off, in the past, 5 years ago to 25 years ago, it seems like a lot of people were using the term global warming. Now, then we transitioned to climate change. So there's a lot of global warming deniers spreading misinformation, saying that environmental scientists and activists are super confused. They first were calling it global warming, now they're calling it climate change, and they just can't make up their mind. But it's not like that. They're two completely different things, and if you understand the basic science of climate change, you would understand what that means. So global warming means, as we continue to burn fossil fuels, mainly from combustion engines, and all of that goes up into the atmosphere, there's more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. It has to do with methane, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, oxygen, all these different things. So some of those are more detrimental when it comes to trapping the sun's rays in the atmosphere. Some of them are less detrimental. Methane's horrible because it attaches more molecules to the atoms or whatever. Joe probably knows a lot more. Joe does know a lot more than this. So back on point. So as we continue to see the parts per million increase, right now we're probably about 420 to 430 parts per million of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. As we continue to see those increase, we continue to see Earth's atmosphere increase. Now, with the Paris Climate Accord and other United Nations and environmental simulations, as the parts per million in the atmosphere continue to increase, it continues to increase the trajectory of the global temperatures. So if we can keep it in between a certain range, in between like 420 to 480, we're going to stay around 1 degree, 1.2 Celsius. If we start reaching around 500 degrees, 500 parts per million greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, we're going to start hitting, I think it's like 3 degrees Celsius. So that's basically Earth's atmosphere increasing. Now they take, probably hundreds of thousands of calculations around the world, and they come up with an average. That average is Earth's temperatures. I'm not exactly sure how that's calculated, but it's probably just like a lot of calculations. So Earth's temperature is increasing globally, the atmosphere. So that's global warming, and it's just like it sounds. The globe is warming, atmosphere is warming. Climate change is the cause of consequences of Earth's atmosphere temperatures increasing. Climate change is because the oceans are warming, so that's causing more cyclonic activity around the world. That's caused because of climate change. Climate change is changes in the atmospheric temperatures that are changing ecosystems. Climate change is more related to increase in lightning storms around the world associated with climate change. So the climate is, and there's also a difference between weather and climate. A climate is, maybe Joe could explain this more. So climate change is a consequence of global warming. And global warming is one thing. Climate change is a lot of really bad things. And our society is dependent on the climate to grow our food. That's one of the main things that I'm concerned about climate is food and the food transportation system and us having food. That's why we're seeing increases in food. In the United States, it's predicted that next year, 2021, the average annual food cost for the typical family is going to increase by $700. Specifically, it's like $650 or something, $670, whatever it was. So approximately $700. So another bad thing about climate change, if you have a climate where they're used to having water resources, they build a city. Next thing you know, the climate changes and they're in a drought. They can't get water into that area. That was a huge problem in South Africa a few years ago, where all of a sudden they didn't have water for millions of people. Another really bad thing with California or the whole West Coast when it comes to climate change is we used to have a really moist climate with a lot of rain. So we had all of this forest grow. And now all of that is fuel because now we're more in a drought because of climate change. So all of this forest, this thick, dense forest all throughout the western coast of the United States, the western portion of the United States and through Canada, as well as Alaska, is now dry. And that's why we're seeing more forest fires because of climate change. So I've been talking a lot. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to whoever Sharif would like to speak next, but I covered some good material.
Thank you. Professor Joe, I think, yes.
Hey, go ahead.
Yes, my question is very simple, that our audience want to know more about the difference between climate change and the global warming. How do you want to scientifically analyze? Beside that, they have another questions that what are the cause of the urban heat inside effect? So,
yeah, I was actually just about to address that one. Alex has just talked about, climate change and global warming, which are very closely related. It's kind of like cause and effect. But
right.
The urban heat island effect, the basic answer there is pavement. Hard, dark surfaces absorb a lot of sunlight, and then it re-radiates into the atmosphere, especially locally around the city or the developed area. So that's the basic quick answer to that one. It looks like we're about to run out of time. I just discovered the comments section here, by the way, so there might be some earlier questions too that we've missed. But I did say I needed to tell you all some just a moment of cosmic relief here. We talk about comic relief. I offer cosmic relief, some astronomical stuff that's coming up. Aside from the solstice, the winter solstice, where the sun will be directly overhead in South Africa, actually, at the moment of 2:02 a.m. California time. You can translate that to your own time zone around the world on December 21st. Just by amazing coincidence, because it really has nothing to do with the solstice, but there's this grand planetary conjunction coming up between the two biggest planets in the solar system, Jupiter and Saturn. If you've been noticing them in the south to southwest sky in the early evening these days, they're getting closer and closer and closer on the sky, earning that name of planets, which comes from a Greek word planeti for wanderers. It's these bright wandering lights that do their own thing against the background constellations. Anyway, on the 21st, the winter solstice, Jupiter and Saturn will appear closer together in our sky than they have since the year 1226, way back in the Dark Ages. So they get to a closest approach and crisscross every 20 years. One planet, Jupiter, has an orbit of 12 years around the sun. Saturn, roughly 30 years. You can calculate the beat frequency, and they crisscross every 20 years. But this one is going to be the closest crisscross in a long, long, long time. And the last thing I want to mention now on the cosmic relief front is that the year's best meteor shower is coming up in just a few days, this Sunday night, December 13th. It's the Geminids. They appear to fan out from the constellation Gemini, which is near Orion. And the reason they appear to fan out from there is because that's related to the direction around the sun that we are traveling at that time of year. So we're hitting a swarm of debris that actually most meteor showers come from old comets, but this one actually comes from an old asteroid that's ejected bits of rock and dust, and the stuff comes sparking into our atmosphere as we're moving around the sun at approximately 23 miles a second. And so you get this meteor shower. Unfortunately, here in Santa Cruz, it looks like it's going to be cloudy and rainy, but much of the rest of the world, including the southern hemisphere, will be able to see this. So check it out, the evening of Sunday, December 13th, and check it out a night or two before and after that too. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Sky power to the people.
Okay, thank you, Professor Donalds. Professor Donald, I think that beside that, you want to add something about universal basic incomes and this point as well. So how do you want to add this point for this climate action?
I'm very sympathetic to the idea of universal basic income. It makes a lot of sense. I just looked at the World Bank, and sadly, there's no country in the world that has universal basic income. They've tried it, experimented, it says, in Mongolia and Iran for national universal basic income. And I do know that there's been smaller pilot studies. Finland, for instance, did that. And I know that Canada has tried small pilot studies of universal basic income. So it's something whose time is coming. I just want to say that the way I describe the difference between climate change and global warming, and I want to say both terms have been being used for many, many decades because they mean different things. It was actually a guy named Frank Luntz, who was working for Reagan, I think at the time, who came up with the idea that we should favor the term climate change over the term global warming. Over the term global warming because it was less scary. And so the political machine and the media machine started switching the terms. But global warming just means that the Earth is getting hotter. And when one of the biggest greenhouse gas, or the biggest greenhouse gas, is water vapor. So as the Earth gets hotter, there's more water vapor in the air, which makes for more rainstorms, snowstorms, everything else like that. And so what climate really is basically the statistical distribution of weather events. So how many hurricanes you have, how cold it gets, and on like that. So because there's more water in the air, it also changes the circulation of the ocean. It changes the wind patterns, and because of that, the weather starts changing. In some areas, there's more droughts. In some areas, it rains more, and so basically, it's, as Joe said, it's cause and effect. And the fact that we're getting hotter is causing the weather patterns to change. And when the weather patterns change, the climate has changed, because that's the definition of climate. So I encourage everyone to think a lot about how this is a global problem. And from the United States, we should be, I feel we should be doing more, and we had been doing more. Other countries like Germany and China even are stepping into the void that we've left because of our crazy government right now. I'm optimistic, as Dr. William was saying, that we're getting into a better time. But if you're an entrepreneur in any of these countries, as we've said several times in this forum, problems are an opportunity. So the solar infrastructure has to be, the solar powers themselves, the delivery of the solar energy, the delivery of any kind of energy, the storage of energy, and all of those things are exploding right now and providing a great deal of opportunity. The other thing is, like, how are we going to move people from one place to another? Because places are becoming uninhabitable. As Alex pointed out, New Orleans is, it's flooding drastically every few years. How long, Houston, how long are they going to be able to put up with that? 10 years? I don't know. Not long. So all of those, there's islands where everybody's having to move now in the Pacific because they're getting inundated. Hawaii's water table is rising, so that they're starting to have floods in neighborhoods that they never did before. All of these provide opportunities. So I've kind of got the idea that maybe a little bit of capitalism, like Finland has a system where all the houses have hot water delivered to them because they use the energy from processing the waste, and it creates heat. So they heat up water and then pump it in everybody's house. Everywhere, as I said before, innovation is borrowing something from someplace else and using it somewhere else, like moving it. So look at the countries that are actually making progress, like Finland and the Nordic countries especially, and ask the question what they're doing, and you have an opportunity for a good business somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Cart, and as well as Mr. Alex. This is very interesting. How do you want to add this universal basic income concept for solving these global warming issues? Is it strategically positive for the country, those who have this kind of problems? What do you think?
I'm a big proponent of UBI. It's good to see that there's more and more experiments going on it. Hopefully those can go to larger scale, and hopefully some countries can really lead, because we don't really know what the outcome is going to be until we try it, and it's definitely time to experiment more. But I know personally, I'm on a form of UBI. I became disabled, and I got family support, and it's helped me through the time to where I could be self-sufficient again. And now I have a business, and hopefully I can get my business to be fully sustainable, and I'm living a tiny lifestyle. So, and just in my little experience of UBI, it's helped me to reach my goals of sustainability, or at least a trajectory towards where I want to be. I'm living in a slightly under 300 square feet of living space now, and I could imagine the UBI I've heard of wouldn't be quite enough to support my lifestyle at this point in time, but it's very close. And I could see a lot of people really taking some time off from this just rat race of a lifestyle, this accumulation of more and more. You know, if we had people with UBI, we'd have so many more people like Alex and I who can, and the other panelists who can really afford to devote a large amount of their time towards not chasing income. You know, I'd say probably 50 to 70% of my time is spent on volunteer opportunities. And that's because my father and my mother worked hard and tried to give me a little nest egg so that I didn't have to constantly stay in the rat race. So just from my personal experience, I could see how it would help. But I can't wait. I follow the research closely on UBI. I think from an ethical standpoint, it's where we have to go. From a technological standpoint, it's just patently obvious that we're going to need it. And I think there's a very strong argument that we needed it 300 years ago, or I don't know, centuries before that even. But thanks for letting me share.
Yes, Mr. Alex. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to reiterate that. Okay, so let me jump back. So one of the main reasons and places I think we're going to need to implement universal income are in the countries that are capitalist countries, or we see a lot of capitalism. With capitalism and mass consumerism, we are seeing the divide between the rich and the poor continue to grow. The rich keep getting richer and the poor people keep getting poorer. Right now we're in a pandemic, so we're seeing a lot of people at low poverty level. We're seeing more homeless people in my community where I live. And I think at the end of this year, depending on how it's voted politically, we're going to see a lot of people lose their home. So there has been, right now would be a really great time to implement and utilize universal income as a transition out of this pandemic. So as we continue to see the divide between the rich and the poor, we see more homeless people, we're seeing the rich get richer, but the rich aren't getting taxed as much as they have in the past. And now, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but after looking at some charts and some graphs from some relatively reliable sources, the wealthy, rich, elite used to get taxed a lot more than they are. So they're getting taxed less. So we need more of a balance. I think society just needs to be more balanced. And I think that having a better balance helps us all prosper. It helps us live a better life. It helps the ecosystems and the environment and everything. Right now, our society's out of balance. So I believe universal income will help our balance, just a better balance. So I think it'll help with quality of life. Right now, we're not just seeing suffering in developing countries, we're seeing a lot of suffering around the United States because of homelessness. So universal income or basic income would help a lot of those people get into better living situations and help them in different ways contribute to society and maybe have the free time, like Kurt mentioned, just to work on things that they want to work on and live a better life instead of constantly struggling to eat and survive the night and all of that. So I think taxing people appropriately is important. I think social programs. So I was a strong supporter of Bernie Sanders for everything he was trying to implement and a lot of his views on democratic socialism, socialist programs, taxation and all of that. So socialist programs are not just, the police officers and firefighters and some of the stuff that we currently have established in our society. I think there's a lot of other types of socialist style programs that we can expand on, like public education. And here in America, teachers aren't getting paid enough, and we're just out of balance. I think teachers should be getting paid more, like Joe Jordan, and just what they the value they present our society is just so important, because the more intelligent our society is, the better our economy will be, the better we'll be able to help other countries around the world, and the less suffering we'll see around the world. So again, homelessness is a huge problem right now, and we have to be considerate and aware of the homeless problem, because it's not just homeless people, it's not just mentally disabled people or drug addicts. These people are people that may have had one thing go wrong in their life and things spiraled out of control, or they lost their job, or they spent their entire career learning how to do tattoos or cut hair, or some sort of business that's being affected by the pandemic right now. So I would love to support any universal income thing that so I don't know how to support it other than continue to have conversations like this, try to vote politically. I know that Elon Musk is a supporter of universal income, and when it comes to adapting, we are going to see a shift to technologies, to solar. We're going to see more drones. So there's going to be jobs, but not everyone's going to transition. The people working in the coal industry, the fossil fuel industry, where we're seeing less jobs, if those people don't adapt, which not everyone's going to, we're going to have to provide something for them. And so that's my input with
Thank you,
UBI.
Professor Joe.
Thank you.
Yes, Professor Joe. Actually, World Talent Economy Forums, we are like engaged with different ecosystem, like governments, like different university research centers in Asia Pacific, as well as different corporation. What your advice actually? Because you are expert. Even tomorrow we have a session for green energy. I want to invite all of you, and I request that all of our guests and our audience please share our content as much as possible, because by this way you can learn many important things, like Professor Donald, Professor Joes, and like today's our panelists, Mr. Cart and Mr. Alex. This is very important for World Talent Economy Forums. But my question is that Professor Joe, like how government and academia as well as corporations, they can create better ecosystem, how they can work, what your advice for them?
Well, let's see. Just kind of off the top, that's a huge question, of course. But finding the truth, which is what science does, has to be the ultimate guide, North Star to efforts. I mean, we can talk about the capitalist urge to make money, and good, healthy, honest money is a good thing if it helps people survive and thrive if they're doing good work. But so all of those sectors that you mentioned, the government, the academia, and the industry, if guided by truth, an unwavering search for truth, and then the other big element is compassion and caring about other people and people in general. You can't go wrong if you're really honestly devoted to those things. Where we go wrong is where people get really greedy and selfish. And, how do you institutionalize an end or a limitation to that? Well, that's also part of what government and politics is about. I'm just spouting generalities here, but given that I just heard the question for the first time a few seconds ago, that's the quick, hard summary of what I've got so far.
Okay. Professor Donald, yes.
Well, I back UBI, basic income. Some of the experiments that they've done have actually led to people starting more businesses and being more entrepreneurial. In the United States, if you try and start a business and you fail, there's no backup. You don't have health insurance. You don't have, I'm talking about a small business that's not funded by venture capitalists or angels. So it's a pretty scary thing, especially for all the people in the COVID time. if you have some sort of a backup so that you can do things, then that makes things a lot easier. But back to what corporations can do, I just couldn't really say it better than Joe did, which is that it's not just the corporations. There's been research that's shown that corporations have a tendency to have the values of the community that they're in, which makes sense because the people that work at the corporation live in the community, so they have their own particular values. I think the United States has had this huge propaganda effort about meritocracy and individual rights and liberty and all this kind of thing, where they're just encouraging people to be selfish. And I think that all we can do is just offer them an alternative. I'm totally into the idea of truth in science, or how science develops truth, but it isn't like truth is out there that we can just go out and discover it. Truth is when we all jointly observe the same thing. Somebody can't just declare that, oh, I've discovered that the secret and global warming isn't really happening. That's not the way it works. We all have to be able to check each other and cross-check each other and then check each other again. And the philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce said, truth is an infinite amount of observations by an infinite amount of people over an infinite amount of time. It's a limit that we all have to work together in. I think that, people that are good teaching, like Joe and me and Alex in his own way, that's basically the main thing that can make a difference. So corporations need to, as I said, I couldn't really say it better than Joe. I mean, people have to look for truth and compassion.
Thank you. Mr. Alex, yeah.
I'd just like to add real quick, based on universal income, so that allows people to have the financial capability to live their life and be more resilient if they are starting a small business. Someone on this panel mentioned volunteering, and then there's education. So those three categories would be great qualifications, I think, for universal income. Like if you're going to receive universal income, you have to do X number of hours in one of these three categories, which in general helps the society or the economy of that specific community or country. So those three categories that I just thought of would be, you have to do X number of hours of education that helps just society become smarter and more educated. Or you have to spend X number of hours working on a business and like building your own business, so then you can become sustainable or self-sufficient and also contribute towards society. Or you have to spend X number of hours volunteering, whether it's doing beach cleanups or planting trees, helping elderly people, or there's so many different volunteer opportunities that help make the world a better place, help a community, help a society, help animals and all of that. So it seems like universal income would be very efficient if, when you're in the pre-qualification steps of applying for universal income, like, well, why do you deserve universal income? What are you going to do with all the free time that you have? Like, why should we give you this allotted amount of money per month? How are you going to contribute to society that's going to help the overall income? So again, those three categories, there may be four, I just thought of three, would be education, starting a business or a small business, or volunteering. That's what I wanted to contribute to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cart, yes.
Mr. Cart, maybe you can repeat the question.
Yes, Mr. Cart, can you hear me? Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, I have a little bit of construction noise in the background, so I've been keeping my
Okay. Okay. No problem. No, but basically we just want to know that how we can create better ecosystem with the help of governments, academia, as well as corporations.
I think me and Alex, we talk a lot about Tesla. I think Tesla is really an anomaly you know, they're kind of setting a path forward for companies to really just, you know, focus on a product that's going to save the world. And now we've seen Tesla go from, you know, when I should have bought stock at 40 billion to 500 billion dollars, and I think it's probably has a good chance of becoming the most valuable stock in the world. And they have laser-like focused on the problem and creating solutions to the problem. So I think we're going to see, you know, I don't know if we're going to get to conscious capitalism. You know, I know that UBI, I see that as a bridge towards some other ism, you know, something like a resource-based economy. We're going to need to continue to experiment. And I think that's one of the interesting things I see about the rise of the developing world. It's just, it's kind of sad in some ways that in some aspects that they're following the Western world, but I'm really seeing a lot more experimentation. And I think one of the biggest things that's going to come through is these self-driving cars are going to be monumental. They're going to give us the opportunity to completely reutilize our cities and change our cities. If you look at Los Angeles, where I lived for several years, you add up all the parking lots. You know, we were talking about the urban heat effect earlier. If you add up all the parking lots in Los Angeles County, that is equal to 3 San Franciscos. So what's going to happen when all of a sudden it's only 10 cents per mile to get a self-driving taxi? Well, the average person is going to be spending less than $200 a month in the United States on transportation, and that's $200 sounds like may sound like a lot of money if you're in a different country, but it's probably 2 to 3 times that to own and operate a car in the United States. So we're going to see parking lots change. They're going to become green spaces. They're going to become new urban centers. They're going to become walkable cities. They're going to become sustainable developments. And so what I'd really like to see is a lot more early adoption for companies like Tesla. It's kind of hard. Maybe you can't go out and get a car, but as soon as they start having the taxis come on, you know, if you can start spending your money towards that. We've also got, you know, we talked a little bit about Silicon Valley. You've got Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon. We all have problems with these corporations and their monopolies in a sense. But however, they're starting to run all their data centers, which take massive amounts of mineral, and they are buying gigawatts and gigawatts of wind and solar power. And so we can really continue to push the technology companies because while they're still part of the corrupt crony capitalism that I do see, they are making huge investments in wind and solar and energy storage. And energy storage is really the keystone for it all. It's the last piece that we need, you know, whether we're going to go combination of wind, solar, and batteries, or as I'm sorry, one of the other panelists, I can't remember which one was talking about it, you know, rooftop solar plus battery is going to become very, very competitive. And so I'm kind of going off on different tangents of all the different things we've talked about. I'm sorry if I'm not addressing your question precisely, but we are seeing companies and the rise of NGOs. It's just, and look how we're all meeting here. It's just so nice to be able to, you know, I ran into Alex because I've been writing for Clean Technica, which is one of the bigger websites in the world for talking about clean technology, and I've been doing it all alone. And now me and him, we've worked on a project, and we just raised almost $1,500 to build these micro tiny homes for homeless people. So it's you know the collaboration. Whenever you can get together, like meeting up, whether it's a few companies learning from each other, you know, we've got companies sharing their best practices, and so we can really push companies. We can push NGOs. We can have a wide diversity of tactics. That's one thing you'll always hear me use that term. Bradley Manning, who's now Chelsea Manning, I kind of got that term from her. She says, you know, we really got to get a diversity of tactics. So if there's one of these things that you're hearing us talk about that's like, maybe that's not where you're at in your academia, maybe that's not where you're at in your career, like find your niche. You know, I found mine. It's all about consuming as little as possible. And I'm just a Tesla fan, man, because I thought all those cars were for playboys who were just trying to show off. I considered it greenwashing. But now we realized I watched the price of batteries for energy storage fall 90% in a decade. And that was all done by guys who I thought were posers, you know, and they weren't. They were pushing a technology. They were using early adoption to get to something more. And so, you know, in the next few years, we're going to start to see these self-driving cars. They had a pilot project in Kuala Lumpur going on when I was there. Biggest kick I'm on self-driving cars. If you can make this be the last car that you own and keep you always want to.
Hey, Kurt, could you
I think I'll
rewind
go ahead
that
and
last
end it
part? You're freezing up there. Can you rewind that last
Yeah.
couple sentences here?
Yeah, I would just say, you know, that considering that the buying an EV at this point in time, you know, if you're not already on public transportation or walking, that's going to be huge because that's going to unlock the lower cost of energy storage, which just makes everything else big. And then as these self-driving cars come on, let's get rid of our cars and let's start going with something let's start going more with the sharing economy. And I'll kind of stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have our another new guest, Mr. James Eid. He has James Eid Foundations. And like we are discussing today about climate change and these issues. Beside that, you come up with some good examples specifically for the role of like governments and as well as uh, academia and corporations. How do you want to think about this, the roles of government for climate change as well as uh, corporations and academia? What are your observations for climate change?
Thank you, Sharif. I did want to pick up on what Kurt was just talking about a little bit because I do drive a Tesla and I am not a Playboy poser. Playboy poser and me do not fit in the same sentence. But you know, I drove a Prius before, a hybrid before, but I bought Tesla stock for my niece because of the batteries, not because of the cars. I didn't know about its success as a car maker, but I was very confident in the battery technology was going to help transform the society, and we're seeing that, as Kurt was alluding to. And so I'm a big supporter. And I would want to go back to what happened in the United States, why the government involvement made us such a car crazy country. You know, Robert Moses was a big deal developer in New York City, and he built a lot of the infrastructure in New York City. But he was part of the federal program for the interstate highway system. Now, if the country at that time had decided to go to rails, connect the country through railroads or something like that, it would have gone one direction. But it was, okay, intercontinental highway system, which meant we needed a lot of concrete, a lot of cement, and a lot of rubber because cars needed tires. So Goodyear and other companies could make a lot of money if we put this intercontinental highway system together. And so it was very much a governmental supported and a big companies supported enterprise. Now, if we make that shift, if we have companies supporting a shift to a different type of energy need and a governmental support of that, the same thing can be done. We're not going to be building roads and driving cars on those roads, but we can make it more sane, logical, and sensible forms of communication so that we can connect the entire country, the entire world eventually in a more sane, self-sustaining fashion. And that's the role I see the government playing and the roles that industry can play. working together.
Thank you. Professor Donald.
I want to mention that Facebook, evil Facebook, actually makes their data centers with something that's like a swamp cooler. So what they do is they take the water in the air that is, and they basically evaporate it. And they'll even bring water in. And when you evaporate water, the heat, it takes heat to do that. And so it removes the heat from the data centers. So their data centers actually don't use air conditioning at all. They use just swamp coolers. So industry is very, very interested in saving money and nowadays working with the environment, because especially in Silicon Valley, people are hyper aware of it. And so, as I said, the community influences strongly the culture of the company. So as far as government, I have to agree that, well, one of the things is that it's only part of the story about the interstate system. The other way the government created kind of some of the issues that we have is this whole idea that everybody should have a home ownership. And after World War II, they had this thing called the GI Bill that allowed people, veterans, to buy homes for practically nothing. And I actually connected to this because my grandfather on my mom's side worked for a guy named Fritz Burns. And Fritz Burns basically invented the track house. And he built North Hollywood, various areas all around Los Angeles. And then he teamed up with Kaiser, and they built all the tract houses in San Jose. And so or not all of them, there are some other developers, but many of them. And so they used the fact that cars were becoming ubiquitous, and they made these just sprawling places all over the place, and the government was paying for it. So I think that, if the government could change the incentives. And I agree completely with James that has to happen, because we can't be subsidizing, these cities that just go everywhere, because it costs so much energy for people to get from one place to another. Even the city I live in, which is supposedly all great and environmental and stuff like that, it's very difficult to walk and get your groceries or something. It's more than a mile for me. And, I do it, but still, it's pretty time consuming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Professor Joe.
So, are you looking for a specific answer to a specific question now? I've been
just give the analysis of the on the comments of Mr. James and Professor Donald.
Well, ditto. It all sounds good to me. James, hi. I guess if you just got on, you haven't heard what we've been talking about, but I'm curious about your background or what the ED Foundation is, etc.
Oh, sure, Joe. It's nice to meet you as well. The ED Foundation has been established. My background is in computer science, but my hobby has always been chess. And when I got out of my career into retirement, I devoted my energies and money to chess because it had meant so much to me as a teenager growing up. With the teenage angst years and all that, and in chess I got to meet people that were my grandfather's age. I didn't know either one of my grandfathers, so it was very important for me, and so I wanted to give back to the community, and so I was involved in a national charity. I was president for the last 10 years. I was involved for 20, and but the only thing we could do was the United States, and we would get these requests from outside the United States, and we would have to turn them down. And that kind of broke my heart. And so I established my own foundation, which is global. And so we have established programs in Zambia, Uganda, Nicaragua, and then the pandemic hit, and people are no longer interested in starting chess programs. But the way I wanted to do this is I supply them with equipment, chess sets, boards, that sort of thing. I supply them with instructional material. And the ideal situation, which I'm working for with a partner, trying to get a partnership established to connect them to the internet. Because once we connect them to the internet, they're connected to the international chess community. So this is reaching out to countries or to individuals within countries who are feeling alone and disconnected, and helping them to become connected. And once they're connected to a community, they never feel alone again.
Thank you. Thank you. We directly want to go for the concluding remarks for today. I want to start from Mr. Alex, then Mr. James for today's session, especially on climate change, then Professor Donalds, and finally, I request Professor Joe for the concluding remarks for today's sessions. Actually, World Talent Economy Forum, Asia Research and Development Institute, and Al Noor Academy, Sarhadia Barhad in Malaysia, we are working together. We are developing our communities in between governments, academia, as well as corporations. So hopefully, already last 7 months in online, we are trying to engage with 100 of different organizations from 100 different countries in Asia, from Europe, from North America, from Africa, everywhere. So hopefully in between 2021 in offline, yes, online we can reach many peoples. Beside that, in offline, our target is that we want to reach 1 million people. For these issues with International Islamic University, Daffodil University, Cambrian Education Groups, and UITMs, and many universities, we are collaborating. And hopefully by this way, with the contributions of all of the experts, those who joining today's, hopefully we can move forward, and we will work together. Tomorrow we have session. We have sessions for green energy. I'm sure Professor Joe can give lot of things, and all of other panelists can come up with a different idea on the green technology. So I request all of you to joining tomorrow's session as well. And especially I want to give a special thanks to our audience, those who always support us and help us to contribute for World Talent Economy Forum. So I want to start from Mr. Alex.
Yes, thank you. So again, these programs are so important. Thanks to all the panelists and you, Sharif, for putting it together, all the hard work that you're doing for this, to get this information out. It is really important for the viewers to participate in the conversation, to ask us questions, and to share these videos. The more people these videos reach, we're getting this information and our views, our perspective to more people. So the panelists here, we have our unique perspective, our education, our background, our training, our experience. So we have knowledge in different fields, and that's why we're on this program, to try to help get our knowledge out to a larger audience. And we need to have more of these conversations, and it's just so important towards our transition towards renewable energies and our shift to become a renewable, sustainable society. So I did want to mention, so we lost Kurt, he was on the program. So we have different things that we put forward, that we contribute, different things that we're working on. He was a little modest, but he works for a website called Clean Technica. Its main focus is writing about technology, specifically Tesla cars, batteries, solar technology. So he said he went through a phase where months he was just reading all these articles and just constantly getting information. He's now written 40 articles, he said, and they've been published on this Clean Technica website. So when he contributes to put his opinion and his thoughts regarding climate change, renewable energies, and environmental issues, green products in his articles, a lot of people read his articles, and he's like, a lot of people are checking out his articles and following him and his work, and he's really excited. He didn't mention it, but I guess Elon Musk once or a few times liked or responded to some of his articles. So a lot of important people in the tech world are reading his information. So I wanted to mention Fat Cow. It's the domain hosting server that I have ran my website on for about 10 years now. I went with them after doing a lot of keyword searches, and I specifically chose them because all of their servers, all of the energy created to run their servers is from wind energy. So there's different ways to vote with your money. For instance, these headphones that I bought yesterday, they're made from bamboo and hemp string. The packaging was completely sustainable, from FSC certified lumber from Forest Stewardship Council. So there's different ways to vote with our money, to vote through website, hosting service plans, and everything. We're going to continue to see more companies, big companies, practice good PR by putting solar on their roof and everything else like that. One last thing that I wanted to mention is we were talking about highways and transportation. So Elon Musk and some of the new technologies are focused on the Hyperloop. And I think that's going to help lower carbon emissions when we can transport a lot of people a long distance with lower emissions. And I don't know as much about that technology, but I think it is going to be an important part of our transition towards global sustainability. And that's my concluding remark. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alex, for your very energetic and positive support for World Talent Economy Forum. Mr. James,
thank you.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry I came in late, Sharif. And I just want to say that I'm meeting all of you because of Sharif. And we were on a panelist on a different show. And he said, I am for millions, not millionaires. And he had me right then and there. So I've been supporting his efforts ever since. The opportunity I have is to meet people like Professor Donald and just been introduced to Professor Joe and to meet Alex and to hear things that I did not know and that I can learn from. And that then we can find areas of cooperation to make things happen. And I do have solar panels on my roof. I do drive a Tesla. And so there's a lot about you can do as an individual. But, you know, we want to do the best, and we can't do the best alone. We have to do the best with others. So we have to find a way of reacting to the problems of the world together. And this forum has been one of my favorite ways to do just that. Thank you, Sharif.
Yeah,
Thank
same
you.
here.
Thank you, Mr. James. Professor Donald. Yes.
What I really echo what James said. It's just been some of the people that I've met on this show are just astounding. The president of Daffodil University was here, and Ben, I forget his last. We all refer to each other as Dr. Ben or Professor Ben, but he was here. We've been communicating by email. He just really. I was talking about Finland and how Finland does stuff, and he was just, oh yeah, well, I'm good friends with the Prime Minister of Finland. I've been working with Finland, and I'm doing it heavily right now because I'm doing a research project for a university there. And I agree with James that we have to learn from each other, because there's the thing that I said before on one of the earlier panels about how innovation is about reaching into different social worlds. And what we've been doing in the United States, the idea that we're going to turn inward and we're going to not have relationships with other countries and things like that, is exactly the wrong way to go. For the problems of capitalism, there's also some real benefits, because people are motivated to do things on their own. And entrepreneurs need to just read and look and find out what's going on with this, because there's people, both opportunities and solutions, like the one I mentioned with Facebook and what we've been talking about distributed solar, which James is doing. I mean, if he has solar panels on his roof, he's basically breaking away from the centralized energy. So in any event, that's really glad to meet you, and thank you for having me on the show. So that's what I say.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Donald. Professor Joe.
Hi, Sharif. Well, thanks, Sharif, for hosting this and inviting me on via Professor Donald. And thanks to Donald for dragging me into this. And I guess I'm game for coming on again tomorrow. I guess I should assume that these things run about 2.25 hours. So anyway, I wonder how many people, you probably have some way of knowing how many people out there are actually tuned in. That would be of interest to me. I mean, it's cool that we're all talking to ourselves here, but hopefully we're also, getting other people excited about things. And, if there was one sentence I was going to say as a closing remark, it's that education is the key. Good-hearted, tough-minded, truth-seeking education, and that's what hopefully we are about here in an expanding way. And for those who came in late, I did want to mention my friend Bob Staten's book, Solar Dividends, because that is how we got started on this whole topic today about the universal basic income, and the way you can pay for that, for giving everybody a whole bunch of money on a regular basis, is through the very generous income we all have from the sun. And, there are practical details to be worked out, and Bob addresses that in this seminal book that nobody knows about yet. So hopefully you folks will check it out. If I come on this thing tomorrow, I will have a link to a video that features that concept that he's put together. Anyway, so good luck to us all. Enjoy the beautiful day or night wherever you are in the world, everybody. And nice to meet everybody.
Thank you, Professor. Already, World Talent Economy Forums. This is the initiative of 7 months, but last 12 years we have a very good field works, and we develop different university, school, college, hospitals, and different kind of non-profit organizations. And already we have 10,000 students. From next year, 2021, we will bring all of our 10,000 students in innovation lab, as well as what actually Professor Donald mentions about Daffodil Group, Cambrian Education Groups, International Islamic University. They are very big knowledge hub from Asia Pacifics and this area. We have from World Talent Economy Forum, we make a very strong collaborations with them, with their top management. And our target is that we want to distribute all of your content 100% free to the youth community. If you can understand, here in Asia Pacific, 57% youth, around 50 to 57%. So there is a billions of people. So India, even China, all they have more than 2 billion peoples. So in these billions of people, I think 50% youth, you can calculate that how many peoples are in Asia Pacific. Malaysia is a very good place for it has a very good infrastructures and a very good country for making business and everything. That is the reason I'm from other country, but I'm contributing for here. But I'm sure a lot of excitement, lot of energetic group of peoples, as well as a lot of interesting things we are working right now. Hopefully with your contribution, with all of our panelists contribution, we can ultimately reach our objective. And even you can check that in 2013 I do Asia Debate Academy. It was one of the largest academy around the world, as well as different groups like Cambrian Education Group, United Group. I personally try to build up, as well as we have other contributions. So I'm sure, and I'm very much confident with the help of God, because I am not the only person. We need team, we need teamwork. Definitely we will achieve our objective with our honesty, sincerity. And always I said that I'm not for millionaires, I'm for millions. That is my objective. So I want to start with small. Definitely it will be very much impactful. But professor like Joe, professor like Donald, Mr. James, Alex is a very powerful man, very positive man. How you supporting World Talent Economy Forums? It's really, really interesting. And I'm sure the many youth community, I told you, there is a 50 to 57% youth. They will benefited by our free content. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care. Take care. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.